Mayor Thorn, thank you so much for joining us on this first podcast. So we kind of figured we want to start it out well. So why not start with the top dog of the town?
Oh, well, I hope that this is a good initial launch.
Yes, no, for sure it is. And yes, we do thank you for your time. I know that you are a very busy lady.
I
In fact,
appreciate it.
it actually kind of blows my mind how involved you are. And I know that that's something that you want to do. That certainly comes out when you make a speech or when you are on social media. That just your interaction on social media actually blows my mind how involved you are. I imagine sometimes that's a love-hate relationship, but you are very involved on social media. And I think it's great. But sometimes people are asking you when the fireworks are. I saw something today where someone was asking you about gas prices in town. I don't know if you saw that, but
I
it's
haven't yet. I actually haven't been on socials yet today,
good for
so I
you.
haven't I haven't seen what I'm tagged into. So,
Yeah,
uh, but yeah, social media is it's a it's a great tool, but it is certainly not somewhere where there's, in my opinion, effective dialogue. I'm a big believer in
absolutely.
what you're doing here, that two-way conversation. We can have a lot more thoughtful conversation when you actually can talk to somebody face to face or over the phone.
Absolutely. And yeah, communication, like, over emails can be a little bit harsher. Texting can be harsh. There's no emotion. Social media, it just feels like people can say whatever they want with no real accountability. And I guess that's the beauty of it. And also what can be pretty nasty about it as well. But coming from someone that lives in Okotoks, we thank you for how you engage people because that
Thanks.
does go a long way that you are reachable. If people, I think it's ridiculous, people wanting to know what time the fireworks starts and they're asking you what time that is. So no, we do thank you. And thank you for your public service. That is never something that's easy. It seems though that it was a little bit of a process for you to get to where you are today. It wasn't like you started out, didn't really seem like, just looking at your LinkedIn profile, doesn't necessarily look like you set out at the start to become a politician.
Yeah, it's kind of, well, I've always been a bit of a political junkie. So my family growing up, both, you know, grandparents, aunts and uncles, my immediate family, we talked politics at the table. We weren't that family that said politics was a no-go zone. So I grew up hearing a variety of different perspectives, and it always fascinated me. Resonated towards social in school. I was good in that subject. There was others, but social was definitely one of my favorites. And then in university, I did get involved, particularly provincially, with a couple of different campaigns here in the province. And so I think I always, in the back of my mind, figured I would run at some point in time, but there was no plan for what that would be. I had visions that Ottawa is where I could be most effective. And I think that's the beauty of age. You get smarter as you get
All
older,
right.
or at least I think you do. And I quickly learned that municipal politics is where I could have the biggest impact and sleep in my own bed every night and not be in Edmonton or Ottawa the majority
Right.
of my life. So it allowed me to be with my family, but also be involved in the community that I loved and cared about.
For
So
sure.
that was kind of where I got to.
Yeah. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Lethbridge, raised as I've kind of moved all over the province. My dad worked with TransAlta Utilities, and so we transferred a lot. So by the time we moved to Okotoks in '89, I think that was my eighth community.
Wow. Yeah.
And I've been here since. Well, I went away to university and I came back when I had my daughter. I came back and went, small town is where I want to be, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, no doubt didn't want all that moving around like you had as a child. You probably wanted to try to stay in one community. My wife is the exact same way. Her dad was a banker and they jumped around all over the place. So she really didn't want that kind of lifestyle for her kids as well.
Yeah, and it's funny. I certainly didn't like moving as a kid. I don't think any of us did, but it gave me a lot of skills that are translatable to my adult life, and particularly this job. I can talk to anybody because you had to when you moved into a new community. You had to be
Yes.
willing to get to know people and put yourself out there a bit. So I can talk to anybody. I've learned a variety of different perspectives, and I've lived in a lot of varying sizes of communities, and learned at a really young age that if you didn't actually kind of include everybody, some of my communities were so small that it meant we couldn't have a sports team.
Right.
So you needed to include everybody. So that inclusion piece, I learned that at a young age, that sometimes you need everybody to be part of things to build strong communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make a very good point, because I think in today's day and age, today's climate, political climate, it seems like politicians, and in no way am I saying you, but it seems like, the provincial, federal, and then you look at what's going down in the states, how the mindset is, let's divide and conquer. If we can divide the people and we get half the people, well then, we can go from there. But at the end of the day, I really don't think we're that different. Like, if we have different political views, I think we're so close. And yet it's the politics that seems like it's really dividing these days. And I really hope that, we don't know what's going to happen at the end of April here in Canada, but it'd be really nice if there could be some unity. When we're watching Team Canada play hockey, we could care less where the guy scores the goal from. We just want to win, right? And that's what unity, things that can bring us together. We watched Wicked a few weeks ago, and the line in there is, something that really unites people is a real good enemy. Not that that's what we want, but I do think people are starting to long to be unified.
Well, and I think it's one of the things that actually attracts me to municipal politics is that there isn't party politics.
Yes.
And it's the piece that really, I'll be honest, has disenchanted me both federally and provincially. And I think what I'm seeing in the US is we align with a color of a party or a name of a party first, and then that makes everything else wrong. Whereas municipally, I don't have to be aligned to a party platform. I can look and hear six other perspectives at a table and what the community has to say, what I know I'm hearing from our administration team, what I hear from other individuals in the community, and go, okay, yeah, if we do this and this and this is actually a better solution than what I maybe came to the table with. So it gives you, in my opinion, not having that party lens, which I think is why municipalities have pushed back so hard on having parties at the municipal level, is it forces you to be more collaborative and to be open to hearing different perspectives, because you won't get anything done if you don't find common ground amongst the people that are sitting at that council table.
Absolutely. And I think you make a great point, because yeah, we've all heard the chatter back and forth as to, people's opinions in regards to municipal politics and putting partisanship in the municipalities. And I think we could maybe even look at it, taking it one step further. When you have provincial government, you have federal government, the way that we vote in a leader, and then the people basically have to do whatever that leader says, as opposed to municipal politics, where you vote in the mayor and then you vote in the councillors, and yeah, they have to work together. They have to figure it out, as opposed to, no, this is the way it's going to be.
Well, and I think that that's one of the misconceptions that I hear, back to your comment about social media. There's lots of commentary on social media that it's my way or the highway, or I decide that what's everything. Well, no, I'm one vote at the table.
Right.
So we don't get to do whatever it is I want to do. I have to be able to, no different than anybody else at the table, convince my colleagues that the direction I want to go is what makes sense. We're not Ontario has what's called a strong mayor system, which allows mayors to do more and have more control. We don't have that here in Alberta. And I'm not necessarily a proponent of a strong mayor system. I really do believe in that democratic principle of majority rules, build consensus, find a collaborative path forward.
Yeah, and I guess, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I guess
Yeah, that's okay.
some people might not want to go that way because it slows the process down.
Maybe, but if you are doing the legwork and understanding what's in the community, I do think that consensus you can get to a state. And not that I'm saying we should ever be consensus, because I don't actually think you always get agreement at a table, but back to that majority rule, there's advantages to that. And if I want to do A and the rest of my colleagues want to do B, that's the nature of democracy.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you became town councilor October 2013.
Mhm.
And up until 2021, then you ran for mayor and you won. Now, I think I've heard that you are running again this fall for mayor.
I haven't said officially
You
yes or
haven't? Oh,
no.
okay.
No,
For some reason, okay. I'm sorry. All right.
that's
Well,
okay.
okay. So let's just pretend, I guess, that maybe you are going to run. What do you think when someone that wants to be running for mayor goes and knocks on doors? What kind of things do you think they're going to be hearing about the concerns that people from Okotoks have?
I think there'll be discussion around growth, um, and yeah, growth management. Traffic is one that is always at the doors. I've heard that since I was elected in 2013. Traffic doesn't go away. Then a deer always comes up.
Yes.
And I think affordability. I think we'll hear about affordability as well. Yeah, those would be the topics that I tend to hear about on a relatively regular basis as it is in this seat, but I think we'll continue to hear about that at the doors.
Well, when it comes to growth, it's kind of interesting because I listened to your town hall meeting at the end of 2024, and the growth of Okotoks is actually a lot slower than the other towns like
Mhm.
Cochrane and Airdrie, and well, I'm sure Chestermere's probably in there as well. But our growth rate is considerably slower. What do you think I guess there's a few questions that I can come up with here, but what is the main reason why our growth rate is slower here?
Water is the biggest one. So unlike others in the region, we've had challenges with water. And I use the word challenges lightly in terms of the amount we have for the growth, right? So the Sheep River can't handle all of our growth, which is why we are building another pipeline, a supplemental water pipeline from the Bow River. But since I was elected in 2013, trying to find a solution to water has been on the table. And we've got additional licenses. Our community has done a really great job. We are really a high efficiency community from water usage
Mhm.
and water management. And that aligns with who we are as an environmental leader, just in general as a community. And that's not going to change. So the supplemental water pipeline, that is, we started construction on it. It's in the ground. We will hopefully have taps turning on in early 2026 or mid 2026. But that doesn't mean that we now get to water 7 days a week
All right.
outside. I
Yes.
always put that misconception out there.
Have you been hearing that? Like, are people thinking
Oh,
that all of
yeah.
a sudden they can just open up the
Yeah.
taps and away we go?
Yeah, well, because people have always taken that not being able to water their grass when and where and how they want to, it has been about water restrictions. And really, actually, it's a water conservation policy. It's about using water for its highest and best use. And I've said it many times, green lawns is not the highest and best use for treated water. It's a very expensive water source
Yes.
to give us green lawns. So water, access to water has been how we have controlled growth and been slow growing because we are the only municipality in the province that has what's called a water allocation policy. And so for a developer in our community to be able to build a phase or their next piece in the development, we have to have water in our queue to allow for that. So we've done lots of metrics of how much water is used per single family homes, for apartment buildings, all of that. And we factor that in when we look at what they're going to build. We have to have water available to that. And over the years, we've had times where we haven't had that.
Mhm.
And we also don't approve phases for development if they're going to be 3, 4, 5 years before they're going to actually put a shovel in the ground for a home. So we've been able to really manage that. That's going to be the next council, I think, is going to have a lot of work. We'll see some of it before the end of this term with council of what are going to be our next phases of that, because we're going to now have pipeline from the bow, and it's not going to be, we're going to have access to a lot more water. So therefore, those controls aren't going to be the way they've been in the past. And I think that's probably the biggest messaging, I think, for our community, is to truly understand. I hear it all the time. Just stop growing. That isn't an option. It really, you just can't say no to growth. You can't.
Well, yeah, like, and I've heard people talking, and I've seen the rebuttals. It's done. We basically have to grow. Otherwise, we're going to have communities all around us that are tapping into our services, and yet we're not going to be getting the tax dollars. Is that the heart behind it, or?
Sort of, yeah. But I think too, it's understanding as residents and as citizens, I think sometimes we're really engaged on what's happening federally. We're really engaged on what's going on provincially. And municipal government is a bit of an afterthought. And if I had one wish, I would actually flip that on its head. People should be highly engaged municipally in what they're doing, because it's what impacts them on a day-to-day basis. So where this comes to and relates to growth is, I'm going to say it was about 5 years ago, and we did the consultation probably about 8 over the 3 years prior to that. We approved what's called a municipal development plan. And that municipal development plan dealt with our annexation. So we annexed a whole bunch of quarters prior to us doing that plan. And that plan laid out the trajectory for Okotoks in terms of growth. And so that was the place to be engaged on what's going to happen with this community, because ultimately that plan laid out for whether that's developers, home builders, landowners, private landowners. This is what the town of Okotoks has for a boundary. This is what their plan is and their vision is for that. And here, if we want to grow, this is what we need to do to comply with that. So that plan happened. It's been approved. For us to now backtrack from that, not that you couldn't change that plan, but that plan would require a whole bunch of public hearings. And so it could still happen and be changed, but it takes and opens us up then to potentially legal challenges, because there's a big chunk of the land that's in that plan that has been purchased and sold by private landowners to developers or land developers with the intent of, this is the plan. So now if you start to change that and unravel and say, no, we're not going to do any of that, you open yourselves up for legal issues, because you're changing the landscape,
For
right?
sure, absolutely.
And so by not being engaged at the right spots municipally, sometimes our community misses the boat on that. And I think that's the challenge municipal government has, is sometimes we're not really very clear of, why do you need to care about this? And why do you need to have a voice and be involved and understand what the trade-offs are of all of those? And if Okotoks had chosen not to grow and stayed as a 30,000 capped population, which they removed that before I got elected on council. But if they had chosen to sit in that state, to your point, that's exactly what that was happening around us, is there was land being sold to developers and they were building communities right on our border. Greenhaven is a great example. Greenhaven Acres to the east of us.
Yes.
If you ask them, they all live in Okotoks.
Sure. Yeah, you write a
They use,
letter to someone in there, it's Okotoks address and everything, yes.
but those tax dollars go to Foothills County. They don't have recreation amenities. They use the recreation. They've created a pathway that walks to our dog park. All of those pieces. Well, that just puts more pressure on the taxpayers that are in Okotoks to do it. And I think what this council is really trying to do, and where I've always said, is growth is a good thing, but you need to have a plan for, what does growth look like? How are you managing that growth, both from a infrastructure perspective, from a financial management and financial health perspective? And then how do we make sure that we keep the identity that is what draws us all to Okotoks, right?
Well,
Keep that
yes,
identity.
absolutely. And that's a very good point, because we've lived here, my family, we've lived here now for 13 years. I lived here previously before that and absolutely loved it. That's why I brought my family back here. And yeah, the demographics, things are changing. Like it's funny, even horn honking, like before, you get a little friendly honk that, hey, look out, you're in my way or whatever. Now horn honking has changed. There's a whole
Mhm.
new level of horn honking in town. I think people are changing. I lived in Calgary for a few years, and there's a lot of neighbors I didn't even get to know. I didn't know my neighbors. Okotoks completely different. Now, you even go down the bike paths and things like that. People aren't as friendly anymore. And I think we're getting an influx of new people. Things are changing, but yes, we do. I think we want to keep that identity as a friendly town, as a place where people can come because it's safe. It's a great place to raise your kids, but that can change over time as well if we're not careful. So it's how do we? Because I heard on another. It was posted on YouTube. It was about 7 years old, where the town was advertising to new businesses to come and plant your businesses here, and they were projecting that our town's going to be 80,000 people one day. Now that's probably not going to be in my lifetime, but I guess you never know how long I live. But I think that's scary for people that are here. They moved here because of the small town feel, but it feels like we're starting to lose that a little bit, even though our growth isn't that
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, and I think it's also around, what does small town mean? So there's some people that think small town means a population number, and then there's others that small town is a feeling. So for me, small town is a feeling. I've lived in really small towns and I've lived in bigger towns, and there's a different feeling across all of those. This community, for me, that makes us that friendly, that charming, unique, is about connection. And I think if we want to keep that small town feeling where you say hi to people on the bike paths, you can drive down the street without feeling like that you're being honked at every corner,
Yeah, yeah,
and that your neighbors, we need to each look at ourselves individually. What am I doing to contribute to that? Because if you're going to just rely on town of Okotoks municipal government to create that, you're right. We absolutely will lose that feeling because government can't do that. But if we each take some responsibility, and I'll use my neighborhood as an example, I've been in where I'm at for over 20 years, but we've had people move out on the block, but we make an effort when the new person moves in to introduce themselves, tell them when the garbage days are, make sure they know who else is on the block, invite them to the community fire pit, and include them in community so that they're connected in. And so if we each make that effort to at least know the neighbor on the left and the neighbor on the right, well, then when new people move in that aren't from Okotoks, right? So we're getting people that are moving from other communities that maybe they've never experienced that before. We start to educate them of, but this is how Okotoks rolls.
yes,
This is what it means to be an Okotokian. And we have a shared responsibility to do that. And if we all were doing that, it's really hard for that feeling to disappear because you're connected to different people. And I think when you're connected to people and you know people, there's a different approach to how you greet your neighbors or how you talk to somebody on the street, and how you interact with each other. And so that, I think, is a challenge that I give to every resident that is concerned about small town, is what are you each doing to
yes,
keep that small town? How are you participating in events? Are you inviting new people to come to events? Are you telling them about the events? How are we displaying ourselves to the rest of the community? And social media can be a pro for that or a really big con. And that is a lens that people are using to judge moving new businesses, choosing a community, all of those things. They are looking at social media.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, as we as Canadians, sometimes we start to become so dependent on the government that the government is blamed for everything. And, we're in the community I live in. I have one of those community fences, and uh, I got to paint it again here, but I painted it years ago. And while I was painting it, because it's right along a sidewalk, I had lots of people walking past me. Um, almost everybody said, like, "What are you doing? Like, what is that your job?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, actually it is. When I bought the house, it's on title that this fence is my responsibility. It's my fence." And they're like, "Oh, I thought that was the town's." And I do think so many times we become so dependent on, if we see something that needs to be done, we get online, we phone somebody, we go to social media. And I think a lot of people think, if I post this on social media, I've got my point across and the town's going to change things now. Well, I think
Sorry.
no, it's again just back to the point where it's just, you wish people would go through the proper process and the channels before venting on social media. But
Well, I think that's one of the pieces of, the slowest way to get something done and get changes to happen is social media.
yes,
You can tag me or other counselors on it, but that is absolutely the slowest way
yeah, for sure.
to make something happen.
Yeah,
And, and 9 times out of 10, it's not about a governance issue. It's about a how issue. So, our administrative team, they're the execution. They do the how, they implement.
yes,
Whereas council sets policy and direction and overall, this is what it's going to look like. But the number of how questions that I deal with on a daily basis it's significant.
yes, absolutely.
So if you can even attribute that of, oh, this is about how they're doing it, I shouldn't email Mayor Thorn. I
Yes,
should I should email, or call the town and find out who I should talk to.
yeah,
That'll be far quicker than waiting for me to get you connected to somebody or to get you the answer,
for sure.
than it will be otherwise, right?
Yeah,
And yeah, so I do think that that is, that small town feel. I've been here well, we moved here in 89, so what is that, 25 years? 26 years almost? No, it's even longer than that. 30 something. I can't
right.
do math this morning.
Yeah, yeah,
But I can still drive down the street with the number of people that are here and probably see 4 or 5 vehicles or 4 or 5 people that I know who they are. I know what their vehicle is, and I can wave. I can't go into a grocery store and get out of the grocery store without a conversation with somebody.
right.
And community events, I see people, and it's not just because I'm a public figure, it's because I know people in the community and I'm connected to community. And there's lots of ways for residents to get connected. We've got a ton of nonprofit groups that are always looking for volunteers. We do a lot of events, so there's lots of ways to engage in your community and be connected into the community from a position of positivity or a position of support and helping.
Absolutely.
Because I think in this day and age, expecting government to do everything, we're all coming for a rude awakening because the financial picture isn't there for us to do things that have been done in the past. We're going to need to come full circle to how I saw it when I was young and growing up, and that was your local clubs. They built the rinks in your community. They remodeled playgrounds. They created, the toboggan hills. And we did that with community investment and community initiative. We didn't wait for the government to do it. And I think we're going to need to see more of that. And, that's why the Okotoks Pickleball and Tennis Center is such an accomplishment for us as we see that, is because what we've done as the town is provide some land and some servicing to that land, but a volunteer organization has gone and fundraised. They've gotten grants. They're overseeing the construction of that, and they're going to oversee the operation of that building. But yet it's going to be a community amenity available for our entire community. And we were able to transition that far more affordably, far quicker than if we waited for the government to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and that's a great initiative, and I'm glad to see that that's happening and that the town's going to have this. So I've taken a lot of your time. There's just one more thing. I know I had a list of topics that I wanted to discuss, but we're not. I hope this is like an open invitation to you to please come back on. One thing is just, I know that the garbage, no doubt you're hearing a lot about the garbage issue and what's going on now. We're going to twice a month where we're going to get our black bins picked up. green and blue, still weekly. Are people starting to come to terms with that once they've seen the size of their bin and realizing that they're okay? Is there still a little bit of confusion or people upset, or are they seeing the picture that we're going to save a little bit of money?
Usually with Okotoks, I've been at this job for 12 years. So Okotoks doesn't like to change. Our community just generally doesn't like change. And so my experience has always been we need to live with it. We need to see it. We need to feel it and then go, oh, I don't understand what was the problem with that. So yeah, with garbage, we are making some substantial changes to it. Biweekly pickup is one. Granted, you still have the exact same capacity you had before. We're just now going to pick it up every 2 weeks. And part of that is being done for a variety of reasons, but one of it is around getting people using organics and recycling more, which is also about extending the longevity of the landfill. Landfill space isn't being approved like it used to be in the province of Alberta. So we need to maximize the space that we have. And we do, our landfill crew is, they're top notch in terms of redirecting material out there.
Well, absolutely. They're very organized. They do a
But
great
we
job.
did some audits in 2024 of black bins across the community. And about 60% of what's going into black bins is organic material.
Really? Okay.
And so when you take and look at that level of it, we've got a ways to go as a community of what we're putting out into the landfill. So that was part of it. The other part is obviously the province moved in recycling to extended producer responsibility. That's finally been implemented here at the beginning of this month. So that meant there's going to be a bunch of changes on recycling and not from a customer perspective. None of our residents will see that, but around who's paying for it. So in Alberta, we haven't had an extended producer responsibility program. So it meant that you were paying for recycling, whereas many other provinces, producers paid for the recycling. So we're paying twice because it was captured in the price of a product and we're paying to recycle it.
Okay.
So that's been implemented. So we've been waiting to do some garbage changes for a while, but we didn't want to make multiple changes and to our waste program. So we waited for the rollout of the extended producer responsibility program to do it all kind of at once. So yeah, I think we'll have a better idea kind of come the end of August. Usually it takes 2 or 3 months for people to get a handle on what it is. The 2 different delivery days, I think is the one, or pickup days is the one that I'm still hearing quite a bit about. And that decision has been made for a few reasons. One of it is around managing our growth. So preparing for that future. We are a growing community there. Everybody is well aware of that. So how do we prepare for that growth that we can continue to manage the growth with the same staffing and infrastructure that we have? And moving to different pickup days gives us more flexibility as a municipality in terms of how we'll manage that. And so it was one of the things we looked at. And we looked at a lot of other communities. We're not unique in making this change that had done it. Yeah. So I think it'll be a blip for sure. It's a bit of a blip, but my experience has been once people get there and start doing it, they understand it a bit more and go, oh, this is actually not a big shift.
For sure.
And,
Yeah.
I always use the example of Veterans Way. If you ask people in the community, what do you think of Veterans Way? They love it. It's fabulous. But when we made the decision to expand sidewalks, put in that Veterans Wall, change the layout of that a bit, do some different plannings, we had an uproar.
Right.
There was huge pushback to it. Nobody wanted that change. And now it's there and people
Everybody loves
are
it.
super happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Merritt, thank you so much for your time. Again, it's such a service to be in public service, and it's not easy, especially because everybody has an opinion, and you make an announcement about something and 50% are in favor. Well, you'd hope 50% or more would be in favor, but chances are you're going to have people that are upset and have comments and feedbacks regarding whatever change you make. But no, thank you for serving this town of Okotoks. It's a great town. We've all chosen to live here. And it's all because of the great community that's here, the setting. We got the river valley. It's such a great place to raise a family as well. And I know that we want to keep those characteristics. And I think what people are fearing is that it's kind of slipping away because it's growing. But yeah, I think the initiative to keep it small, keep it feeling small, is a desire that we all have, because we all chose to live here for that very reason. Um,
Agreed. Yeah. You know what? I really appreciate the opportunity to participate. I absolutely come back. I think for me, public service is, I don't know, I believe in contributing to your community, and this is how I've chosen to contribute. And I love Okotoks. It's home for me. You know, my daughter just bought a house here in the communities.
Right on.
That is always been my objective, is that our kids can choose to come back here when they're ready to come back. And but I genuinely love my job most days, but like every job, it has its challenges.
Yeah.
But it's easy to love what I do when you love the community that we're building. And I encourage our community to get out and be involved in the community in a
Absolutely.
positive manner, and whatever.
Yes. Well, if you could do me a favor and help me out and point me in the direction of different organizations that maybe need a bit of a push where people can volunteer. Of course, we want to get the food bank on here very quickly, just to talk about the needs that Okotoks has, and no doubt growing in their needs. And all year long, I think they get a good push around Thanksgiving and Christmas and those times. But just ways that we can highlight the organizations that need a help, that are promoting Okotoks and helping people that are in need at desperate times. So if you can keep the dialogue open with me and point me in
Yeah,
the
for
right
sure.
direction, because yeah, we want to get people highlighted. We want to get small businesses highlighted. I'm not going to ask you today what your favorite small business is. That's not fair. But we're going to every week we are going to highlight another small business that is doing a great job in town, because certainly they do need some help, and sometimes they just need exposure.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I don't have a favorite because I do a lot of shopping local, but
For sure, I was joking.
my one comment would be, though, is that I encourage Okotoks to think about where they spend their money in a month, right? So if you've got that, you're spending $1,000 a month on whatever that is, figure out how could you shift 10% of that it's being spent locally, or 10% more that's being spent locally, because maybe you're already spending a big chunk of that locally. And that's analyzing all of it. And sometimes it's just about understanding what is here. You know, there's very little now that I go to for online shopping, or I go to the city for, because I can find it here locally. And the impact of spending locally with a local owned business is that there's lots of research out there that every dollar you spend, it'll rotate in your community 9 more times when you
Mhm.
spend it at a local business, because it's our local businesses that are typically donating to those nonprofits you talked about and supporting their causes. Their kids are going to school here and they're involved in the sports groups, so they're donating there. You know, so it circles a lot of times when you can do that. So,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
your $50, lunch out, could you spend $50 here for, you pick up lunch so that you've got lunch when you go to the city if you're
Yeah.
working in the city, or having dinner in local. There's just so many different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I invite you back anytime.
Perfect.
Again,
Well, I look forward to
I
listening to the podcast.
yeah, for sure. I had a list of other things, but we didn't get to them today. But maybe next time we will. And we also look forward to your announcement. Either way, whether you're
Well, I
running or not. Do you have a date in mind that you're going to let us know?
I have a date, but I'm still not telling anybody a date of where I will have determined my decision.
So you're not even
You know,
giving us the date.
No, I'm not even going to give
No.
you the date.
Okay.
No,
All right.
you know what? At the end of the day, it's still, from my perspective, it's still early. We've got a few
Sure.
things left that we got to get accomplished, and I would really like to focus on that. And once you make those election announcements, everything becomes election focused. And
For
I'm not
sure.
ready for
Yeah.
us to make that shift. We've got some work we still need to get done. So I'm
Yeah.
focusing on that part of my job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for your service to this great town.
Thank you.
And yeah, we look forward to many more months of your service. And no doubt we will ask you back again, because there might be some kind of hot issue we need to discuss.
Absolutely. Anytime. And I look forward to listening to the podcast, Carlin. So I wish you the best of luck as you launch this new venture.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye bye.